Right, well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on our next webinar here. So this morning, it's myself again, Mike Smitherman, and I've got Louis Bedard with us on our technical team. Morning, Louis.
Good morning.
As always, we've got a fair number of people on the line here, so our lines are muted. If you want to ask questions or as we go through the webinar, feel free to put those into the Q&A or chat window in the Zoom session. We'll get to them either as we go through, if that makes sense, or we'll lose some time at the end to answer those. The webinar is being recorded, so expect to see a link that we'll send out afterwards, and feel free to share that with colleagues who couldn't make it today. So the agenda for today, some of you may have been on our previous webinar where we did a sort of high-level overview of what push intelligence is about and the platform. And the goal with this webinar is to start a deep dive into some of the different areas of the product. And this is one of a number of webinars that we're going to be doing over the next few weeks. And today what we want to focus on is really some groundwork around what the building blocks of push intelligence is and the different types of content that you can integrate into the platform. So this is really a grounding for some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about in future weeks around alerting and anomaly detection and distribution. But the goal is to really give you a grounding of what those types of content are that you can work with. And we'll go through, obviously, a description of what they are. And Louis is going to take us through a demo of how we build that content and why we build it. So just the 1 minute refresh for those that were on the webinar, or a quick intro for those that weren't on the previous one. Metric Insights was really all about changing the way that information is consumed within an enterprise, and that's done with this concept of push intelligence and the platform that we have. Really, the premise is the traditional BI approach of publishing dashboards and reports for your users isn't working anymore. People are overwhelmed with data, and giving them more data is not the answer. And so we attack this problem in 4 ways. One is to really give users one place to access any relevant information that might be pertinent to them. So that's through the concept of a consolidated portal where they can come in and search for any content that might help them in their day-to-day jobs. The second is the concept of distribution and enterprise distribution. If you ask people to come in and look at things every day, they'll forget, they won't have time. So the platform can start to send out content to users based on what they're interested in and what's relevant to them. The third pillar is this concept of anomaly detection. So only tell people about critical events in the data, again, that they would be interested in. I don't want to see everything all the time. I just want to know what's changing that's relevant to me. And then having a workflow system that ensures anything that we do alert people to is getting action taken on it. So ensuring that we're closing the loop around any critical issues. And so with a platform like this, business users can start receiving those critical pieces of information that they need to take action on. Now, in order to deliver that sort of functionality, today's webinar is all about understanding the building blocks that support that. And so I'm going to introduce some terminology here that we use on the platform, and Louis is going to take you through in the demo. It's important to understand that to support those sort of things as alerting and anomaly detection, there's different types of information and content within your organization, and you have to be making sure you're using the right content at the right time. So the first stage in implementing a use case within Metric Insights, whether again it's publishing content within the portal or creating alerts and anomalies, is to make sure that you're using the right building blocks, or as we refer to them, elements on the platform. And there's 5 types of elements that we're going to touch on today. The first are the concept of metrics. And these are really your high level or your indicators of performance of the business. And they're time series pieces of information that are often dimensioned in multiple ways. And the intent is to use them to spot trends or anomalies in the business. You know, things like daily sales by country, where are we over underperforming, hourly website traffic by our different sites, where do we need to put our focus? So that's the first thing we'll touch on. The second is the concept of data sets. And what these allow us to do is to, as the name suggests, snapshot sets of data over time with the intention of understanding how that data is changing or what exceptions exist. So for example, what's changed in my sales pipeline today compared to yesterday? Which new opportunities do we have? What have we lost? What are my top 10 performing products this week compared to last week? So you'll see that data sets allow us to take almost a point-in-time picture of the data to run analysis like this against, and you also see that they form the building blocks for some of the other content that we have. The third thing we'll look at are reports, and in a typical fashion, these are ways of visualizing what we have in data sets and the analysis we do on them. So reports allow you to create visualizations that then can either be viewed interactively or sent and distributed out to your users in alerts or emails. The fourth is what we call external reports. And this is where we can connect to other third-party tools to provide access to your existing reports and dashboards, so that, again, users have one place to access them. And the fifth is the concept of external content. And this is basically being able to give portal access to any web-based content that you might have, anything accessible via URL. So it's a lot to take in, but this morning we're going to go through those 5 types of content and show you what they're all about and how you create them. Our platform builds on your existing infrastructure, so we're able to create those elements and source those elements from many different areas, whether they're your operational systems, cloud applications, whether it's existing databases that you might have, or your existing BI tools. We sit on top of that architecture to build those elements and that content. And with that, what that means is that we're connecting to the different data sources within your organization. And we connect to a data source for 2 different reasons. The first is so that we can pull data to support things like the metrics that we spoke about, so the trends of information, and the data sets, the snapshots of data that you might be interested in analyzing. And the type of ways we can source metrics and data sets are through JDBC connections to your existing databases and data stores, things like MySQL, Oracle, whatever it might be. From big data sources where you have a big data initiative and platform in your organization. From existing dashboards and reports in your business intelligence tools, we can also, you'll see, source metrics and data sets from those. From your operational and cloud-based systems, where we can pull data via API calls into those systems, and also sort of more generic connections into things like CSV, flat files, whatever it might be, web services calls. So you'll see us working with different types of data sources to provide the data for metrics and data sets. That's the first reason we connect to these data sources. The second, which is more specific, is when we're looking at business intelligence tools that you may have in place, we also connect to those to pull images of your existing dashboards and reports. And we do this so that we have a way of then sending those images out in emails and alerts so that users can see what's going on in them. So when we talk about external reports, we're creating those because we want to provide a link to those existing dashboards through the portal, but we also want to send out images of what your dashboards look like at one point in time. So with that, I want to transition over to Louis. We're going to go back and forth and go through each of these 5 things, show you them in the product, show you how you create them, why we create them. And we're going to start with metrics, which again is that time series type of data. So Louis, all yours.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mike. Okay. So hopefully you guys can see my my browser right now. And what we're looking at this point is the home page of Metric Insights, which acts as a portal for all your enterprise content, as Mike mentioned a second ago. The different elements that we have that Mike just mentioned are all showcased here. So you have some metrics or some KPIs, and these are a few examples that you see here, where you have your data points, your comparative lines, even the charts that made up those KPIs. So we'll be creating some of those metrics today together. Mike also talked about external content, external report, so link to your favorite business intelligence dashboard. Now, in this demo, we're showcasing the fact that we can connect to all the mostly used business intelligence tools on the market today, from Tableau to Click to MicroStrategy, Power BI, SAP, Business Object, Salesforce, and so on. So we can connect to all those different types of applications. Other things that you'll notice here on the portal page here is the ability to create reports as well. So you can create exception reports, different types of snapshotted reports. And last but not least, we talked about connection to external content as well. And we have example here, a quick link to video on our YouTube channels, RSS feed, and so on. So as Mike mentioned here, what we'd like to do is to really go through step by step in all the different elements that we support. And the first one we'd like to do is to start building metrics with our system. So before I start doing so, I'd like to kind of explain the use cases that we're working with today. So in our current example, we are a wine business that sells wine products around the world via several different sales channels. And in this particular case, what we want to track, we like to track our sales across those different regions that we have and have Metric Insights automatically detect the anomalies for us. So we talked about it before. When we want to build a metric, we can build a metric around several different data sources. So in our case here, the first case is I would like to build a metric in two different ways. The first one, I'll build it against a relational data structure, MySQL database in this example here, and also one against a business intelligence system. So the first thing I'd like to do is build a daily KPI or a daily metric. We support multiple different time series. In this case here, I'll start with building a daily metric. So that brings me up to the metric editor. The first tab, the info tab here, we'll go through this. So what I'd like to do is build this metric we'll call the daily sales. Let's call it the daily sales KPI. And this one will be sourced against our SQL database. This KPI will be dimensioned by different types of countries that we have. And what I'd like to do is to store this data into a webinar categories. If you remember my homepage, I had some categories on the left-hand side, so I'll store this there. Then after that, I'd like to start loading the data in order to build this metric. So we talked about the several different data sources here that we have available to us. By opening this list of data sources, you kind of have a flavor of the different types of data sources that Mike was talking about here in our system. The first thing I'd like to do is to load this data against my relational databases, my demo database that I have. So at this point here, I can use the SQL Builder to go ahead and select my fields from my tables, or you can freeform and just type in your SQL statement. So once I've done that, all I need to do is to validate my data source, my statement against the data sources to make sure that the data will be returned. In this case, it's telling me it's going to return some decimals data, and then all I need to do is to collect my data, enable, and publish it. At this point, once this KPI has been created, we'll go and see what this KPI looks like.
So again, what's happening there? So because we're connecting to a JDBC source here, we're executing a SQL statement because it's SQL based. It's gone out and collected an initial set of history for that metric, and then from this point on, it's going to be incrementally adding days of data into this for our different countries.
Absolutely. So, and upon creation and loading of this data, we are now presented back into our metric viewer. So I'd like to take a few seconds here to discuss what we have. So we're looking at 4 weeks of data here in front of us, And what you're noticing here is Metric Insights, when we're loading the data on the platform, is not just loading the current values of your data and also the time of this data, but it's also profiling the data. In other words, it's calculating the percentage changes, the moving average, minimum and maximum, and so on. And this is done for all the different data points that we're bringing into the platform. So in this example here, we created the KPI that is dimensioned by different types of countries. So if I change for different types of countries, you see them highlighted here. And then you're being presented in either a standard or a statistical view of the data. So what you'll notice automatically are data points that are falling outside of the standard deviation of our moving average are then being highlighted with those big points like this one here. So in this particular example, if I go back and show you 9 months worth of data, you can see where Metric Insights was able to discover those statistical anomalies automatically in the platform for all your different dimensional values. So that's the first portion of creating a KPI, building a metric against a relational data structure. But sometimes you don't necessarily have access to the underlying data sources, as we just did in this example. But rather, what you do is you have access to a business intelligence dashboard. So in this case, we can source the same metric from this dashboard. So as a mean or as an example here, I wanted to show you this particular dashboard here is presented against a Tableau dashboard, but that could be any business intelligence tools, and we'll see others further on in the demo. So Power BI, Click, and so on. So in this particular examples here, I'm still tracking my sales and my profit multiple different ways across multiple different filters that are applied onto this dashboard. So what I'd like to redo again is building a KPI, but this way being sourced from this particular entity. So going back to Metric Insights, I will go ahead and build another daily metric, but this one will be against our Tableau dashboard. So similar tab that you'll see here as things are loading in the platform. I will dimension this next KPI again by country. We'll call it again daily sales. But in this particular example here, it will be sourced from Tableau. We'll put it in the same category. And then after that, if I go back to my data tab, now instead of sourcing it from my data sets or from my demo database, what I'd like to do is to be able to source it from my Tableau server. So now it's very easy to select the different Tableau worksheets that I want to select this from. I like to select from my sales and gross profit table. I will select my country as a filter using all the values that I have. And now when we're working with those types of business intelligence tool, instead of being presented with a SQL statement or having to write a SQL statement, we have a visual editor that allows you to pick and choose the fields that you want to select in order to build this KPI. In this example here, I'm selecting country, calendar date, and total sales amount. Upon saving this, as usual, the data is being validated to make sure we have the correct data for this building this metric. And just need to collect it, and we'll enable and publish this KPI.
So again, depending on the type of data source that you're sourcing metrics from, really determines how you set up and pull that data. We looked at a SQL statement where we're connecting to API-based sources, as I explained before, and typically BI tools are API-based. We present it with a visual editor where it's very easy to go and collect that information. This should be done in a second here. Typically, you're loading an initial set of historical data when you first set up Metric Insights, particularly if you've got history in the underlying source. Obviously, from that point on, then it will incrementally update the metric based on the frequency, in this case daily. So here you can see, exactly the same metric, but in this case sourced directly from the BI tool.
Fantastic. And as a matter of fact, Mike, if we go back to the home page here in our webinar folder, we're able to create those first two KPIs here, or metrics. One of them sourced from SQL and the other one sourced from Tableau. And you'll notice that all the metric values, of course, are the same, no matter where you're sourcing them from.
So that's our first element type. So metrics, time series data. So if I go here, the reason we build them is because you want to look at trends in metrics over time, automatically start to uncover unusual values or anomalies in the data. And again, for those that were on the last webinar, it's really the building block for providing alerting to your users and around the high-level indicators of your business. And alerting and anomaly detection is something we're going to go into in much more detail in a future webinar. So metrics are number one. The second thing we're going to look at is data sets, and again, the ability to snapshot sets of data within your systems. So Louis, do you want to take us through that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So why would you build the data sets, right? Sometimes you may not be storing historical data into your data sources. As an example, for example, we often see some BI dashboard that only shows today's data or yesterday's data, but people might need to understand the data over a period of time. So in this particular example, I'd like to build a brand new data set and load all this data into this particular space. So again, we'll call it our daily sales data set. It will be loaded on a daily basis, stored again into my webinar category. And then after that, I go ahead and build this data. And the same paradigm exists where I have the ability to load this data against a relational structure or against Tableau. In this example here, I'll freeform write my Tableau, my SQL statement here, validate the statement for particular dates. In this case here, I'd like to select for 2016, any particular dates for my data set works. It's going to validate the statement. And then the premises of being able to load snapshot of data where I'll have history of my data that will be loaded in the platforms. I like to keep snapshot and load historical instances for about 2 weeks worth of data. Webinar. Okay, very nice. Okay, so update the data set here. And now it will just ask me for a specific date, so we'll keep it for 2 days of data.
Yeah, so again, what's happening there is you may not, in this case, we've got some history within our underlying data source in our database, so we're able to load historical snapshots. Oftentimes that isn't the case, so we would, as we set up this data set, it would be starting from today and then incrementally saving, looking at the updated dashboard or data set and snapshotting that on a daily basis moving forward. And again, the reason for doing this is to start to look for changes between those data sets.
Excuse me. Okay, wonderful.
So you got that.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we loaded the data and we talked about snapshots of data. So let's take an example of what this looks like. This is the data set viewer. We have several different snapshots of data. Like we said, we loaded 2 weeks of data here. And the beauty about this snapshot is then you can go back in time and see exactly what happened on any particular day and keep a history of those. Now, in my particular example, what you're seeing here is that you have all your data, and then you can start creating different types of views in your data. The first view that I would like to create is an exception view to show a specific sets of data. In this particular case, I'm interested in looking at areas where my sales are actually greater than $100,000. So some of my total sales amount is greater than a specific value. In this case, I will go 100,000. And you're noticing here I'm having 96 rows of data on this particular day. By applying those changes now, we're trimming down your data set to a more manageable ways of looking at 30 rows of data. And also I'd like to focus on my product categories for my wine only. So then I can add a product categories. You can see here that you can create any sets of rules on your data. And in this case here, I just want to select my wine categories where my sales are greater than 100,000. When I created a view like this one, I can go ahead and save this view as an exception view. So in this case here, just sales greater than 100,000 for wine. So now you have this view created, you can save it, and now anybody on my team has the ability to use this view as a source for their reports and so on. And when you go back in time, as you'll see here, that you have all those exceptions where these condition happens. So that's one way of creating what we call an exception view, and then from this point on, I can create a report on this data. But before I do that, the second thing I like to do on this data set is creating a change view. So since we're having snapshots of data, as we saw here, and if I'm interested in tracking changes between two instances, such as, are there any combinations of, so I'll be able to track my changes here, are there any combinations where my country, my channels, and my product categories, for each and every of those, where my sales have more than double compared from one day compared to the next? So here I can create a new rule where I'm saying, is it the current sum of my total sales amount is greater than the previous sum, prior sum of my total sales amount, so the previous day, by, let's say, we talked about more than double, so we'll say more than 100%. And when I go ahead and apply these changes here, you saw that I went from my 96 rows of data all the way down to my 5 rows of data. So just right now, what I did is I created an exception, a change view, and then I can use this change view to create any other types of reports. So in this case here, where sales are 100% greater than previous day. Previous day, I will save this as a public for everybody on my team to be able to use. And there we go. Now on our data sets, we have our 2 views that we created and all the data.
So again, data sets are ways of snapshotting data where you may or may not have the history available in the underlying source. It lets you build those views to start trimming it down to something that is actionable for your users through a set of exceptions or changes. As we're going to see now, they're also building blocks for the third type of element, which is the concept of a report that allows us to visualize the results of that analysis and distribute it out to users.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mike. And at this point, that's exactly what I would like to do, is I'd like to distribute that that data sets that we're seeing here to the rest of my sales team. So right here from the data sets, like Mike said, mentioned good building block for metrics and report. I'm interested in building a report here. So what's nice is it's all ready to go, and at this point I will be brought back to my report editor. So at this point here, all I want to do is to create my daily report where my sales are 100% greater than the previous day. Our data has already been selected because it's part of that data set view. You can go ahead and edit and change your fields, of course. So if I would like to to name this particular field sales instead of sum of sales and so on, I could change this. And then what I like to do for this particular report, in the report that I'd like to bring in by business intelligence visualization. So in this case, I'm thinking about putting a sales dashboard where I'll map the columns in my reports, the columns in the filters values into my BI dashboard. So you saw my Tableau BI dashboard before. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just mapping the fields that we have, country, channels, and product categories, to the filters that we have in Tableau. And I like to display this. And so this enabled and published that, and we'll show this report in a second. We'll do again this snapshotting of data that are going to be displayed to report.
So again, that's taking that set of exceptions that we had within the Tableau within the data set and putting it into a visualization within Metric Insights, which we refer to as a report, which is what you're seeing here.
Absolutely. And now I like this, Mike, because this is our exception report with our 5 rows of data snapshotted daily. And in this particular case, as I said, that we mapped it up to the business intelligence dashboard down below. So in this case here, we see Australia, website visit, and wine accessory. If I want to see what's happening in Spain, corporate sales and wine, just selecting the field here would give me the right values.
So this is now useful to our users, right? We've gone from having a dashboard down the bottom here, which probably, I don't know, across these different filters, maybe what, 500 or more combinations of different filter values there. If I wanted to really understand what was, which products were doing particularly well, it would take me a lot of time every day to go through that and figure it out, to having our data sets automatically uncover which combinations of those filters show the big increases, and narrowing it down to a much more actionable set of data.
Absolutely. And Mike, as we just saw here on the data set, what I'd like to do here, since we are back in the data set, is going to create a couple of metrics as well. We created the metrics against our SQL databases. We created a metric against the Tableau dashboards, and now in this particular example, I'd like to create also a metric built against this data set here. So just wanted to highlight this as well, because I think it's a pretty neat process. Where in this case, again, I want to create a daily metric with my sum of my total sales amount, and so again, daily sales. But this one, it will be from my data set, and I want to aggregate that and dimension that by country. And once I've done that, it's a very easy process to go ahead and see how your metric has been built, a quick look at what the metric would look like, and then I could go on and add additional metric. Now, for the sake of time, I'll just go ahead and build this particular metric, and then I can go ahead and view it on the home page. That particular KPI, similar to the others that we built, is going to be available to us right there.
So reports, again, way of visualizing those data sets, those exceptions and change reports, which you can then use for your alerts and emails that go out. Byproduct as well as if you're bringing stuff into data sets, it's very easy to create quickly those metrics that you might want to use as well. So the fourth main component is the concept of external reports. So everyone is building reports and dashboards already in other tools out there, and we don't want to replace what you're doing there. What we want to do is give users a single point of access to those tools and be able to receive them in alerts and emails that get sent out.
Yeah, Mike. So I like that we took a look earlier at the Tableau dashboards, but in our sales and our wine sales organization here, we're actually using multiple business intelligence tools, including Power BI and ClickSense. So oftentimes it's challenging for users to remember which dashboards and report exist and where these dashboards are located. So once again, Metric Insights portal is a neat way to organize and give access to all those dashboards in one single location, as we're seeing here on our homepage. And we can do this obviously with the concept of external report. So let's go ahead and build one. The external report I would like to build is actually going to be around the Power BI for this example here. So we're taking a look again, stay on our same team, so daily sales. And this one is going to be for Power BI. We are going to store the same information again in our same webinar folder that we have. And then after that, again, the trigger, the image trigger, how often we want to refresh the information here is going to be set up here. And then I go ahead and select my report. For this particular example here, I'm interested in my daily sales dashboard. And as I created this content, now I can view everything within Metric Insights. So I'll view this particular report within my viewer here. And as you're about to see, all I need to do is to save and collect my images. And now Metric Insights is going against Power BI to collect this dashboard and bring it back forefront.
So remember, when we were talking about data sources, there was two reasons we connected to data sources. One is to pull data in the way that we've just been looking at. The second is the ability to be able to pull images, and that's really what the external report is all about. It's about providing initially a link to that dashboard through the portal, so users don't have to hunt for it, but it's also collecting an image every time this dashboard updates, so that we can send that out in emails and alerts so that users can see an accurate representation of it.
Absolutely. As you can see here, we're running a live Power BI dashboard in an iframe, still within the confine of Metric Insights. If I go back to the home page, what we talked about before, similar concept as you can imagine exists. So if I want to bring a ClickSense dashboard, the paradigm will be exactly the same. While you'll see ClickSense embedded within the application. as an external report. And the same paradigm exists for Tableau and all the other BI dashboards as well.
So again, allows us to embed them in the portal, but also allows us to use them as what we term a payload, or as an image in alerts and emails that we send out to people. The final type of content that we can put in is what we call external content. So if you're going to provide an information portal, a BI portal to all your users, you want to make sure that you can really put anything in there that they may find useful in doing their job. And so we have this concept of being able to link to any web-based, any URL-based content that you might have, be it documents, videos, other applications that are web-based and accessible via a URL. So I guess quickly, Louis, let's look at an example of that.
Yeah, I like that. So external content, in this particular examples, I mentioned before that we do have a Metric Insights YouTube channel. So we'll literally call it the YouTube tutorial. And at this point, you literally will put everything back into our webinar folder, and then I just have to be able to select the particular URL, have the link here for our external channels, what I'd like to do, and the external content URL. And then all I need to do is to define what do you want the tiles to look like. So you can even upload a little image file that would be an easy referenceable point into, in this case, in our tutorial here. You save this up, and then this particular link is I've been created, and now back to our webinar folder for all the content that we created today, our link to our Power BI dashboards or reports or metrics, and even our YouTube tutorial. And clicking on that will bring the users directly to the right location.
So we've been through a lot of stuff there, but I think what you're hopefully starting to see is that, providing an effective portal and an effective push intelligence solution to users involves, lots of different types of content, and they're all used for slightly different purposes, which again, we touched on today. We also touched on in the previous webinar: alerting, distribution, portal. And so, the intent of today was to give you sort of a grounding in what those different types of content are. And in the next few webinars, we're going to drill into how they're used. And this is hopefully going to make that much more seamless in terms of understanding how these different elements are used. So with that, going to look and see if we've got any questions coming in. We do. If you want to ask any questions, please enter them into the chat window and or the Q&A window, and we'll get those answered. I'm just looking at them here. I would say hang around during the Q&A as well. We're going to show you how you can link to a free trial and try some of the things that we've been looking at today. So just bear with me quickly. So first one. So when you talked about metrics, at what frequency can they be updated?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike. The KPI, the metric we're looking at was a daily KPI, but we can load data all the way down to the minute. So we can have a minute KPI, hours, day, a week, months, and so on.
Second question, you showed some data connectors in both the slides and the product. Is that your full list?
Yeah, we have an API that allows us to have a quick connection, right, to create data connection. So for all the relational databases out there, we can connect to everything via JDBC driver. So that's easy. Any relational databases you can think of. And then for the application, we have over 40+ connectors to all the business intelligence and other applications on the market today.
We have a plugin layer that is API based. So if a third-party application has an API, it's very simple for us to build a plugin to those different applications. Question about distribution and what the different distribution methods are in the application for pushing this content out. something we're going to touch on in more detail in a future webinar, but do you want to take it at a summary level?
Yeah, absolutely. So of course we can send all this nice reports and digest via email, but we can also send information via SMS text. We have an app for all the phone-based applications, so push notification as well, and so on.
Yeah, so we're going to drill down into distribution and alerting in a future webinar, but there's many different ways of getting this content out, and you want to make sure it's in the right place at the right time. And then the last question here, I think, Louis, is a good segue into what we're going to talk about quickly. Do you have a free trial that we can test this stuff on? So let's look at that as we're coming up against time, and we'll come back to other questions. There's some there as Louis is doing this. So we do have a trial where you can spin up your own instance of Metric Insights, and actually probably worth you showing quickly how to do that and a good way to get started.
Absolutely. So we just started a Metric Insights instance trial here, which will be similar to what you're seeing on the screen. And we have this concept where it's very simple to build a metric just by loading a CSV file. So the first time when you'll come in the system, you'll have the ability to go ahead and decide to build a metric against the CSV. And as you're about to go ahead and build this metric, you can go ahead and load this data against this database here. So in this particular example, all I have is we'll be able to load this data against my CSV file if this screen comes up in a second here.
All right, well, that's coming up. We have another question here. Data sets, are they live from the database or cached in Metric Insights server? Is there any limitation on volume of the data sets? So the data sets are stored in Metric Insights in a relational data store on our back end. So they are cached, and that's again because oftentimes the history isn't available in the underlying source. The limitations are on basically in terms of how beefy the server is to support that information. We support big data sets on the back end, and actually as we move through this year, one of our major releases coming up towards the end of the year is the ability to put those data sets into a big data store as well if you want to do massive sort of analysis of information.
And Mike, as you mentioned that, I just loaded up our CSV, and now we're previewing some of the rows of this CSV, and then we can go ahead and start building metrics. It's pretty much as simple as that to stay on our theme here. Daily sales, again, KPI, but in this case here, it will be a CSV file. Loading calendar date as my date column, keep our daily KPIs. I'd love to add on my sales amount, dimension again by country, just to show another example of that. And then you see this daily sales KPI appear here. So I could go on and add additional selection all the way up to 5 metrics. Go ahead, finish and building them.
So if you go to metricinsights.com/trial, it will spin you up automatically your own cloud instance of Metric Insights. And as Louis is just sharing, probably the quickest way to get started is to try building some metrics off a CSV. That will be a quick way to start, looking at metrics and trialing that. Let me just check the question panel before we start. Good. Well, thanks for joining us today. As I mentioned, look out for an invitation to our next webinar where we're going to drill into some of the alerting capabilities of the platform based on those elements. It's on April the 10th at 10 a.m. If there's further questions, you can always reach out to myself or Louis directly, and we look forward to talking to you next time. Thanks.